Hi, this is SOSF. Alright, pull up a chair. Let's talk about something wild. Something that's sitting right there in the background of everything we do, every single day, and we don't even think about it. I'm talking about the juice, the power, the electricity that runs the whole damn show. We are so ridiculously dependent on this stuff, it's not even funny. You're listening to this right now because of it. Your phone, the lights in your room, the refrigerator keeping your food from turning into a science experiment, the pump that brings clean water into your house and takes the nasty stuff away. It's everything. It's the invisible god of the modern world, and we just assume it's always going to be there. We flip a switch, and the light comes on. It's magic. But what if it wasn't? What if the magic just stopped? Not just in your city, not just in your state. What if the whole planet went dark? I was reading this crazy detailed report, a deep dive by some serious people, that games out exactly this scenario. What happens if the world loses power for 72 hours? 3 days. That's it. And man, it is a trip. It's not some far-fetched, tinfoil hat fantasy. The people who wrote this aren't novelists. They're strategists, engineers, the kind of folks who get paid to worry about the things that could actually happen. And what they lay out is one of the most terrifying, fascinating, and eye-opening things I've ever read. Because it's not the darkness that gets you. It's what happens in the silence that follows. It's how fast everything we've built just unravels. So let's get into it. Let's talk about how fragile this whole thing really is. First off, you gotta understand what the power grid actually is. It's not one big, solid machine. It's more like a bunch of different spider webs all tangled together. You've got the national grid, which connects to the regional grid, which connects to your local utility. It's a system of systems, as the eggheads call it, and a lot of this gear is old. Like, your grandpa's old. Transformers the size of a school bus that were installed when Eisenhower was president. We're pushing this ancient, creaky system harder and harder every year. And now, we're throwing a whole new level of crazy at it. Think about all the AI stuff coming online. These data centers are power-hungry monsters. They're sucking down electricity like it's going out of style, and we're just building more and more of them. So you've got this insane new demand on a system that's already groaning at the seams. Then you add in the green energy thing. Now, I'm all for it, but it adds a whole new layer of complexity. A coal or gas power plant provides a steady, constant hum of power. It's predictable. Solar and wind? Not so much. The sun goes behind a cloud, the wind stops blowing, and the power level dips. The grid has to constantly balance this fluctuating supply with our constant demand, and it makes the whole system more jittery, more fragile. The experts, the guys at the Department of Energy, are basically waving their arms and screaming about this. They put out reports saying that our dependable power supply is shrinking while demand is exploding. One of their recent projections said that by 2030, the risk of major blackouts could go up by a factor of 100. 100. That's not a typo. That's the government, the people who are supposed to have it all under control, saying, hey, this thing is getting real sketchy, real fast. So the system is stressed. It's a tightrope walker in a hurricane. All it needs is a push. So what could push it? What could actually take the whole world down? The report lays out a few scenarios, and they're all plausible. The first one is straight up cosmic. It's called a geomagnetic disturbance, and it's happened before. Back in 1859, there was this thing called the Carrington event. The sun basically had a seizure and blasted the Earth with a huge wave of charged particles. This was the era of the telegraph, right? That was the high-tech internet of its day. And this solar flare was so powerful that telegraph systems all over the world went haywire. They were shooting sparks, zapping the operators, and some of them even kept working after they were disconnected from the batteries, running purely on the energy coming from space. It was nuts. Now, scientists have looked at ice cores and tree rings, and they found evidence that these superstorms from the sun happen every few hundred years. It's a statistical certainty that another one is coming. We just don't know when. If a Carrington-level event happened today, it would be a civilization ender. This wave of energy would surge through the long transmission lines of our power grids. It would flow into those giant, house-sized EHV transformers and literally cook them from the inside out. They would melt. And here's the kicker. Those transformers are the backbone of the whole system. They are custom-built, weigh hundreds of tons, and have a lead time of like a year or two to build and replace. You can't just go to Home Depot and pick up a new one. A powerful solar storm could destroy hundreds of these things across a continent simultaneously. The damage would be catastrophic, with costs in the trillions of dollars. It would be a blackout that could last for months, maybe years. Then there's the stuff we do to each other. The report details two main man-made threats. The first is a HEMP, a high-altitude electromagnetic pulse. This is when someone detonates a nuclear weapon, not on a city, but way up in the atmosphere, like 20 miles up. You wouldn't see a mushroom cloud. You might not even hear it. But the gamma rays from the blast would interact with the atmosphere and create a massive, instantaneous pulse of electromagnetic energy that would spread out over an entire continent. It wouldn't knock down a single building, but it would be like a lightning strike hitting every single unshielded piece of electronics at the same time. It would fry the sensitive control systems, the sensors, the computers that run the power grid. It would be like a digital plague, wiping out the nervous system of our society in a fraction of a second. The lights would just go out everywhere. The second, and maybe more likely, hostile act is a coordinated cyber-physical attack. This is some real modern warfare stuff. We've already seen a preview of this. In 2015, hackers, probably state-sponsored, got into the Ukrainian power grid and shut it down, leaving 250,000 people in the dark and cold. It was the first time a cyber attack was successfully used to knock out a power system, and it was a massive wake-up call for everyone. The report I was reading references a simulation that Lloyd's of London did. They're the big insurance guys, so they're always thinking about worst-case scenarios. They modeled an attack using a sophisticated piece of malware they nicknamed Erebos. This thing would be designed to sneak into the control systems of dozens of power plants and just sit there, dormant, waiting. Then, at the same moment, it would activate. But it wouldn't just turn the plants off. It would manipulate the controls and force the massive turbines to spin out of sync with the grid. If you know anything about engineering, that is a recipe for catastrophic destruction. These giant, multi-ton machines would literally tear themselves apart. In their simulation, the simultaneous destruction of just 50 generators was enough to trigger a cascading failure that knocked out power to 93 million people across 15 states. The economic damage? Somewhere between $243 billion and over $1 trillion. $1 trillion. From a piece of code. And if you think that's far-fetched, just look at what happened in the summer of 2024 with that CrowdStrike software update. One little bug in a security program crashed millions of computers at once, grounding airlines, shutting down banks, disrupting hospitals all over the globe. It was a non-malicious, accidental version of the same thing. A single point of failure in our interconnected digital world creating immediate, global chaos. So you've got the sun, you've got nukes, you've got hackers, or maybe it's none of those things. Maybe it's just what the report calls a perfect storm. This is where a bunch of smaller, more normal problems all happen at once on a grid that's already weak. Think about the Texas winter storm in 2021. You had record cold weather driving up power demand, while at the same time, the cold was freezing the natural gas supply lines and the wind turbines, crippling the supply. The Texas grid came within minutes of a total collapse. The operator said if it had gone down completely, it could have taken weeks or months to bring back up. Now imagine a similar weather event hitting multiple regions at the same time, combined with a few random equipment failures, maybe a small-scale cyber incident. It could be enough to start a chain reaction that nobody could stop. It could just cascade, tripping breakers, overloading lines, and spreading across the continent like a virus. So, that's how it could happen. Now let's talk about what it would look like. Let's walk through those first 72 hours. The first hour. The Great Silence. The moment it happens, it's fast. In the 2003 Northeast blackout, the final cascade that took out power for 50 million people took less than 10 minutes. It's a wave of instability that moves at nearly the speed of light. 1 second you're watching TV, the next, darkness. A profound, deep darkness you're not used to. Immediately, anything electric stops. The hum of the city dies. Subways and trains screech to a halt, trapping people in dark tunnels. Elevators freeze between floors. Factories fall silent. For the first few minutes, it's just confusion. People look around, waiting for the lights to flicker back on. But they don't. The silence deepens. The realization starts to sink in. This isn't a normal outage. Hours 1 through 8, the walls go up. This is where the first critical system breaks. Communication. The walls of isolation start to go up around every single person. Your cell phone might work for a few minutes, as you and everyone else frantically try to call someone. But the cell towers themselves are about to die. They have battery backups, but those are typically designed to last for only 4 to 8 hours. As those batteries drain, the towers go dark, one by one. First in the cities, where the networks were already overwhelmed, and then spreading out. By the 8-hour mark, for most people, the cell network is gone. Your smartphone is now just a pocket-sized brick with a calculator on it. What about the internet? The big data centers, the core hubs of the internet, they've got massive diesel generators. They can run for days. But that doesn't matter to you. The last mile of the network, the little nodes in your neighborhood, the modem in your house, they don't have that kind of backup. They die with the grid. So, no internet, no news, no social media, no way of knowing what's happening. Is this just your city? Your country? The whole world? You have no idea. This is a huge deal for the emergency responders too. Their own systems start to fail. Phone lines, radios with limited battery life. They're flying blind. They can't coordinate. They can't get a handle on the scale of the crisis. Society is plunged into an information vacuum. And that is a terrifying place to be. Fear and rumor become the only things that travel. Hours 8 through 24. The world stops moving. As the second half of the first day begins, the next wave of failures brings civilization to a physical standstill. First, transportation. The traffic lights are already out, creating instant gridlock. But the real problem is fuel. Your local gas station needs electricity to pump gas from the underground tanks. Without power, those millions of gallons of fuel are completely inaccessible. Every car, every truck, every bus on the road is now running on a finite supply. Within 24 hours, vehicles start running out of gas and are just abandoned, clogging the roads and making them impassable even for emergency vehicles. Electric cars? They're just heavy paperweights at this point. The entire global logistics chain just shatters. Airports might have their own generators to keep the runway lights on, but they can't refuel the planes. They can't manage the passengers. The trucks that bring food and supplies to the airport aren't coming. So, air travel is done. Ports and railways go silent. The just-in-time delivery system that stocks our stores and keeps our economy moving completely ceases to exist. At the same time, a much quieter but far more deadly crisis is unfolding. The water stops. Our water and wastewater systems are totally dependent on electric pumps. They pump water from rivers and reservoirs, push it through treatment plants, and keep the pressure up in the pipes to deliver it to your tap. Some of the main facilities might have generators, but the hundreds of smaller booster pumps and lift stations usually don't. And even the ones with generators face the same problem as everyone else. How do you refuel them? As the pumps fail, the water pressure drops, first in high-rise buildings, then across entire cities. The water that might be left in elevated towers is all you have, and that won't last long. And when the pressure is gone, it's not just an inconvenience. It's a public health nightmare. The pressure in the pipes is what keeps contaminants out. Without it, groundwater, bacteria, and all sorts of nasty stuff can seep into the water mains through cracks. The water that might still trickle from your faucet is now potentially poison. You'd need to boil it, which is hard to do without electricity. And it gets worse. The wastewater treatment plants also fail. So raw, untreated sewage is now flowing directly into rivers and lakes, contaminating the environment and any downstream water sources. In some places, sewage systems will back up completely, flooding into streets and homes. Hours 24 through 72. The breaking point. By the end of day 1, the foundational pillars of our world have crumbled. The next 2 days are about the direct, brutal impact on human survival. This is when the hospitals become the epicenters of the crisis. Hospitals are required to have backup generators, but they're designed for a normal outage that lasts a few hours, maybe a day. They typically have enough fuel on site for 24 to 96 hours. But in this scenario, there are no fuel deliveries coming. Ever. As the 48-hour and 72-hour marks approach, hospital administrators face an unthinkable choice as their fuel gauges drop toward empty. They have to start deciding which parts of the hospital to let go dark. Life support machines, ventilators, dialysis, surgical equipment, they all rely on that power. And without running water, sanitation and sterile procedures become impossible. Hospitals turn from places of healing into potential death traps. Then there's the food. The global cold chain, the network of refrigerated trucks, warehouses, and grocery store freezers, is broken. The food in your own fridge is unsafe after about 4 hours. The stuff in your freezer might last a day or two if you don't open it. After that, spoilage is rampant. There may be tons of non-perishable food sitting in warehouses, but with no communication and no transportation, it might as well be on the moon. The supermarket shelves were picked clean in the first few hours by people who saw what was coming. Now they're empty. Hunger becomes a powerful, primary motivator for everyone. And the economy? It's gone. It has ceased to exist. Every form of electronic transaction, credit cards, ATMs, stock trades, your direct deposit, is impossible. The digital money that makes up 99% of our economy has vanished. It's just numbers in a database on a server that has no power. The world is forced back to a primitive state of physical cash, which quickly becomes scarce, and then barter. What's a share of stock worth now? Nothing. What's a bottle of clean water worth? Everything. The entire concept of value gets flipped on its head. A doctor or a mechanic is now infinitely more valuable than a hedge fund manager. This is where the social fabric starts to tear. The report brought up a fascinating comparison. The two big New York City blackouts. The one in 1965 is famous for how well everyone behaved. People were cool. They helped each other direct traffic, shared candles, and crime rates actually went down. It was like a weird, spontaneous festival. But the blackout in 1977 was the total opposite. It happened during a rough time for the city, a bad economy, a lot of social tension. And it was pure chaos. Widespread looting, arson, violence. Over 1,600 stores were looted. Almost 4,000 people were arrested. So the blackout itself doesn't create the social response. It just acts like an accelerant. It pours gasoline on the social conditions that are already there. It reveals the truth of a community. Is your neighborhood a 1965 neighborhood, or a 1977 neighborhood? The authorities would be almost powerless to stop any of it. The cops, the firefighters, they're facing the same problems as everyone else. They can't communicate. They can't move through the gridlocked streets because their vehicles are out of gas. And then you have what the report calls the first responders dilemma. These people are citizens too. They have families. Are they going to report for duty and leave their own loved ones unprotected? Or are they going to stay home and look after their own? Many of them would choose their families. You can't blame them, but it means the organized response capacity of the state would just evaporate. So that's 72 hours. 3 days. In 3 days, we've gone from a complex, global, technological civilization to a collection of isolated, hungry, and terrified tribes. Now, what happens next? Can we just flip the power back on? This is maybe the most shocking part of the whole thing. The answer is no. Absolutely not. The process of restarting a completely dead power grid is called a black start, and it is a monstrously complex and delicate operation. See, here's the catch-22. Most big power plants, like coal, gas, or nuclear plants, need a huge amount of electricity just to turn themselves on. They need it to run their own pumps, fans, and control computers. But in a total blackout, there is no electricity. So, the process has to start with a few special types of power plants, usually hydroelectric dams or certain gas turbines, that are designed to be able to start up without any outside power. A dam, for instance, might have a small diesel generator that's just powerful enough to open the water gates. Gravity does the rest, spinning the turbines and generating the first spark of electricity. From there, it's like a surgeon performing a heart transplant. The operators use that first bit of power to energize a tiny, isolated section of the grid. They carefully route that power to a nearby big power plant to give it the juice it needs to wake up. Once that second plant is online, you've created a tiny, fragile power island. Then you have to slowly, painstakingly, expand that island, adding a little bit of load, then another power plant, then a little more load, one by one. If you add too much load too quickly, or if the frequencies don't match up perfectly, the whole island collapses, and you have to start all over again. You'd be doing this all over the country, creating dozens of these power islands. And the final, most difficult step is to link them all back together, synchronizing them perfectly to reform the main grid. A single mistake here could trigger another cascade failure. And that's the best case scenario. That's assuming nothing was physically broken in the event that caused the blackout. If hundreds of those big transformers were fried by a solar storm, or generators were destroyed by a cyber attack, you can't even begin the black start process. You'd have to clear the wreckage and install new ones first. That's a process that would take months, if not years. And all that time, the 72-hour nightmare just continues. Even if we could get the power back on in a few weeks, the world would be changed forever. The sheer trauma of the event would be a psychological scar on humanity. Trust would be shattered. Trust in technology. Trust in government. Trust in the idea of a globalized, interconnected world. That model of just-in-time efficiency that our whole economy is built on would be seen for the fragile gamble that it is. The new paradigm would be resilience. Just in case. Nations would pull back from globalization, focusing on becoming self-sufficient in the things that matter: energy, food, water, manufacturing. Supply chains would be reshored. The world would become a more fractured, more suspicious, and more competitive place. The nations that recovered first would hold all the cards, and they could use their power, literally, to dictate terms to their neighbors. It would be a new world order, forged in darkness. So you read something like this, and it's a lot to take in. It's heavy. But the point isn't to be a doomsday prepper. The point is to understand the foundation we're all standing on. We've built this incredible, intricate, technological palace on a single point of failure. And we've all just taken it for granted. So, what's the takeaway? It's that we need to be smarter. We need to build more redundancy into the system. More microgrids that can operate on their own when the main grid goes down. We need to harden our critical infrastructure. We need to have a real, practical plan for this kind of event, not just some dusty binder sitting on a shelf. And maybe, on a personal level, it's just about having a little bit of awareness, thinking about what you would do. How would you get water? How would you communicate with your family? It's not about being paranoid, it's about being prepared. Because the magic of the light switch is an amazing thing, but like any magic trick, it relies on a whole lot of stuff you can't see. And maybe it's time we all started paying a little more attention to what's happening behind the curtain. What do you think? See you next time.